Rose Bay Wetland, a short film about a place with a long natural history. This is a short story about the Rose Bay Wetlands and their connections with the landscapes and people of Townsville. The wetlands and the story are part of another creek-to-coral Learnscape experience. The Rose Bay Wetlands are part of a special place on the doorstep of Townsville. Located in the suburb of Rose Bay, the wetlands were once part of a continuous system of wetlands, sand dunes and coastal flats that stretched from Kissing Point to Pararenda and across to the Bowley River. We start the history of the Rose Bay Wetlands 120,000 years ago, when the shoreline was 3 to 6 kilometres inland of the current position. At this time, Many Peaks Range was an island, and Castle Hill was partly surrounded by water. At that time, the Rose Bay Wetlands would have been really wet. Around 20,000 years ago, at the peak of the last ice age, the sea level was 100 to 160 metres lower than it is today. The coastline was about 40 kilometres east of Magnetic Island, which would have looked like an isolated mountain range on a broad coastal plain. At that time, the Rose Bay Wetlands were probably really dry. Around 6,000 years ago, the sea level rose to about its present level after the ice age thawed out. At this time, the shoreline was around 2 to 3 kilometres further west than where it is now. Since then, there has been a gradual build-up of sand ridges between Castle Hill and Many Peaks Range to form the current coastline. Sometime between then and now, the Rose Bay Wetlands were formed by the action of waves, tides, wind and water flow from the Mundy Creek and surrounding catchments. By 1968, the natural Mundy Creek had disappeared after the new creek that enters Rose Bay near the caravan park was formed. The original Mundy Creek meandered through the Rose Bay Wetlands and behind the sand dunes before entering Rose Bay where Sir Optimist's Park is now. Mundy Creek was once a string of waterholes that stretched from the ocean side of the cemetery to the lower end of Hugh Street. Regardless of the recent changes, the Rose Bay Wetlands are part of a coastal dune system with its own unique combination of wetland functions, vegetation and animals. Vegetation communities include coastal vine thicket, woodlands and grasslands, with a mixture of wetland types and vegetation including samphire forelands, sedgelands and open pools. The wetlands and woodlands of Rose Bay and the town common were a seasonal source of food and materials for the traditional owners, with plants that we take for granted being a rich resource for the Aboriginal people of the area. The Rose Bay wetlands are ephemeral, meaning at times they dry out. Fresh water flows into the wetlands from the surrounding catchments after rain events, and the sea flows into parts of the wetland from Mundy Creek on very high tides. This combination of seasonal variation and tidal influence creates an ever-changing landscape, both wet and dry. Nutrients contained in the water inflow feed the wetland plants, and the result is a highly productive system that supports a wide range of wildlife. Just as our forests are considered to be the lungs of the world, wetlands are the kidneys. And as with kidneys, wetlands need to be flushed out every now and then to freshen them up. Because of their productivity, the Rose Bay Wetlands and woodlands attract a wide variety of animals, with the most obvious and easiest to sight being the birds. What we usually don't see is the huge range of insects and other small animals that are the smorgasbord of the birds and larger animals. The drier woodlands also support a wide range of animals with more reliance on perennial plants and flowering cycles and the availability of nectar, fruit and seeds. The Rose Bay Wetlands have links to other parts of Townsville through a number of connected Learnscapes, including Town Common, Castle Hill, Ross Creek and Ross River, the Strand, Louisa Creek, Kissing Point and Mount Stewart. Some of the connections are less obvious because of the changes to the landscape over time. However, if you look and think hard enough, you can see how the pieces of the natural landscape puzzle fit together.